Hi guys, welcome back to another video. In this video, I wanted to show you my orchid. Um, just to, diverge from our common eucalyptus videos a little bit, which I will put all of them in one playlist. I think they're already in the same playlist. I just will keep adding more because when I first moved here, I was like, where can I go to check out all the spots, especially if I want to see all the diversity in eucalyptus. So I'm gonna put all that in the playlist so that if any of you are interested, it's easier to find, easy look up. But I digress. Moving back to our topic of today's video, the orchids. So I was once a huge fan of orchids, I still am, but then I was like, I'm bitten by the orchid bug, and I got so many different individuals, different hybrids, cultivars, different varieties, but then I ended up moving for a few times and I gave most of them away, and this is the only one I have left. And in front of me is, drum roll, my dearest Brassavola. Well, there's actually quite few individuals mounted on this piece of cork, but I'll get into that a little bit later. I wanted this video to be more or less of a comprehensive video on orchids because I know there are a lot of videos out there. I just wanted to give you my 2 cents on how to take care of orchids, especially how to get them to flower. And most of us grow orchids for their flowers. And the flowers on all orchids look pretty similar structurally, although they have like such different shapes, different colors, different fragrances. But the orchid here that's blooming right now is a Brassavola nodosa. I believe this one is a triploid. At least that's what the tag says when it was sold to me. That means it's sterile. You can't use it to create hybrids. But if I wanted to just show you the structure of the flower, you can see that they have three petals, like those 3 green things that are sort of 100-degree to each other, and then they have this and this thing as the petal together with this one that's also the petal, but because in orchids they're highly modified, so a lot of people just call them the lips because it kind of looks like a lip. And inside the lips, inside this tube at the end, those are the male and female organs, aka the stamens and the pistils. And all orchids have essentially those 3 sepals and 3 petals, but some of them might be arranged differently, some of them might be more modified, because as we all know, orchids are so well known for different shapes, different modifications of their structure. And I also wanted to show you something interesting. I don't know if you can get this to zoom and focus, but if you see those droplet looking things on the base, at the base of the flower, at the base of the sepals, those are actually nectar. I'm a huge fan of various sweet things, especially nectar, especially naturally occurring on flowers, and just tasting different kinds of nectar is such a treat, especially when different flowers have slightly different flavors to it. The nectar on this one sometimes become a nuance because when I walk past it sticks to my pants or my fingers, it gets sticky, but nonetheless, if I just eat it in time, it's never a problem. So the famous thing about Brassavola is their night fragrance. You see this flower is pretty, but it's not the most extravagant pretty flower. It is, however, very, very, very fragrant at night. It has no fragrance in the day, but every time when the sun sets, it starts to fill the entire room with this it's really hard to describe fragrance. I've heard people describing it as like soapy, but in a fancy soap way, but a lot of other people describing it as like similar to lily of the valley or sweet, but it's just really nice, clean fragrance. That's not too much, but you can still catch a whiff of it even if you are in another room. It's really, really, yeah, it's beautiful. So that's the first part about the flowers and why Brassavola are so awesome. Actually, I have a few more individuals all mounted on this piece of cork. Brassavola likes their root to dry out a little bit in between watering, where they actually grow really, really well mounted. I'm in California. It's not a humid room by any means, but they grow so well. I water it every day, but I've also tried to, sometimes I forget, sometimes I water it every 2-3 days. It's never a problem. It's very drought tolerant. On this mount, I believe I actually have Brassavola Little Stars, which is a hybrid between Brassavola nodosa and Brassavola subuliflora. And I also have Brassavola nodosa on this somewhere, including this triplo that's flowering right now, and a couple of Brassavola subuliflora. I believe that's the scientific name of it. Which was also previously known as cordata, I think. But yeah, orchids really hybridize very, very, very easily, and it's really wonderful to create different hybrids. So if you get the opportunity and the environment and the facility especially, feel free to grow your own orchids and create your own hybrids. But orchid seeds are notoriously tiny and hard to germinate, and for some species takes a very long time, at least years, for them to flower from seed. So most of us just buy established plants. And you also see this this big leaf here in the back. This is actually Rhincholalia digbyana. I haven't got it to flower yet, but it's a close relative of Brassavolas, so I'm hoping it will flower soon enough. Okay, so that's the first part of the video of a showcase of my wonderful Brassavola. And the second part, I just wanted to talk about orchids in general. So 3 groups of orchids that are most common on the market are Cattleyas, Oncidiums, and Phalaenopsis. Brassavola, together with Cattleyas and a bunch of others, and of course the Rhincholalia in the back here with a wider leaf, those are all Cattleyas. So a common structure of those Cattleya group is that they have this structure that stores water and nutrients at the base of each leaf blade. That's colloquially known as a pseudobulb, because it's not a real bulb, it's a pseudo bulb. And in the case of Brassavola, you can also see the pseudobulb here. It's not the most obvious, but it's this part that stores nutrients. And on top of it, those are the leaves. And they can be pretty wide or they can be pretty skinny. But that's a general structure. And on top of the pseudobulb, there are usually 1 or 2 leaves. And for Rhincholalia and Brassavola, there's usually 1 leaf. I don't know what's happening to this individual leaf though. There's 2 coming out of the pseudobulb, but I guess that's the fluke. Or I give it too much nitrogen, I don't know. But yeah, and on top of each pseudobulb, that's the flower stalk or the inflorescence. As you can see in this case, these flowers, if you trace it back, comes out of this pseudobulb. And something I personally noticed is that this triploid actually has inflorescence that tends to branch a lot. So the old one was here, then it faded, and now there's a new branch coming out. There's also some developmental anomalies, like this one's supposed to be a flower, that one's supposed to be a flower, but they become sort of leaf-like structures. But I digress. So that's usually how the flowers are structured in Cattleya, or most of the Cattleyas. Each pseudobulb will flower mostly 1 time, especially each inflorescence will flower 1 time. After it's spent, it will not flower again, neither will the pseudobulb, but the pseudobulb will keep hanging out for
a number of years just to accumulate nutrients, do photosynthesis and all. Cattleyas usually like to dry out between waterings, and they are one of the groups that require a really, really high amount of sunlight. I put my Brassavola under pretty much direct sun, and it's no problem. Sometimes they have those purple dots, which is totally fine, but they really like bright light. And in the absence of bright light, they either grow super, super slowly or they don't really flower. So that's the first group, Cattleya. And going down the descending order of their requirements for light, we have Oncidium. I don't have an example to show you right now, but Oncidium usually have one big pseudobulb at the base and two leaves growing out on top. The very, very famous Cherry Baby, the one that smells like chocolate, is one of the example of Oncidiums. Oncidiums have a medium light requirement. They sometimes can get burned, but they don't quite require full sun, but they still like a pretty bright environment. They like water a little bit more than the pseudobulb tells you, because the first time I was like, wow, such a huge pseudobulb, it must be super drought tolerant, but it is not. The pseudobulb will shrink significantly, and it likes to, it needs more water than the Cattleyas, of course. And in Oncidiums, the flower spike will flower at form at the base of the pseudobulb. And in the case of Oncidium, in the Cherry Baby, which I've had, now it's my friend is taking care of it for me. It grows to quite a huge size. I've definitely seen pictures of giant spikes that are taller than a person, but most of them keeps it pretty manageable. Each flower spike will not reflower after the flowers are spent, and you can probably just cut it off once it turns brown. And so that's our Oncidiums. And the third group that's most common, well, actually the most common one, is sold at groceries, or Phalaenopsis. Phalaenopsis are those ones you see especially sold at winter that has one leaf, one leaf, one leaf, one leaf, alternating 180 degrees to each other. And those have the lowest light requirement, which might be one of the reasons why they became so popular among us as houseplants, because they don't really require a lot of sun. And the other reason is that they're really, really easy to stimulate the flowering. So for Cattleyas and Oncidiums, each new pseudobulb will flower, or at least most likely if it's happy. Cattleya is a little bit tricky. Some pseudobulbs just don't flower, but most of them, each pseudobulb will flower, and a lot of them are free forming, meaning they can flower any time of the year as long as the pseudobulb is mature. But for Phalaenopsis, especially the common type we see at the grocery stores, they flower when the temperature dips below a certain threshold. I think something like 10 Celsius. So usually they flower in the winter, and because of this, it's really easy to stimulate them in a greenhouse to trigger mass flowering. There are some species, or the more of the lower elevation Phalaenopsis, that are summer flowering, meaning that they flower when it's warm. There is a really famous one. I can't recall the name off the tip of my tongue, because yeah, I'm getting all my memories fading, and all my memory are dedicated to eucalyptus now. But that one will flower and in the summer, and the flower looks like a watermelon in a way, and it smells very fruity and very, very fragrant as well. And most of the store-bought winter flowering Phalaenopsis don't really smell. So there is a huge, different taxonomy and classes within Phalaenopsis, but that's in general, they don't require a lot of light compared to the Cattleya, compared to the Oncidium, but they require the most amount of water among those three, and they flower really easily. And sometimes the flower spikes can branch quite easily, and so don't cut it until it's fully brown and dried out. So yeah, I believe that's all I wanted to talk about, how to get them to flower. Oh yeah, and of course, fertilize them. It's not like, as all plants, especially this one, for example, I have mounted on a piece of cork. It doesn't have bark or sphagnum that can get nutrients from, so I have to fertilize it quite often. But the more fertilizer you put in, given at the right concentration that you don't kill them, the faster, the better they will grow. But when in doubt, fertilize. Please dilute your fertilizer, because for a lot of people it's really easy to over fertilize them. Cattleyas are pretty tolerant to salt, so it's not a huge problem. But for more sensitive species, the buildup of salt and fertilizer can really be harmful in the long run. There are also a lot of other different kinds of orchids that are just wonderful and fantastic, but it's beyond the scope of this video. I've definitely grew some of them. Like there's this Maxillaria tenuifloia, flora, I think. That one smells like coconuts, really popular and famous. It's a warm growing orchid. And also there is another Cattleya group that's also super popular. They even have a cultivar, I think it's called After Dark. That's almost a purely black flower. And those are actually kind of a really interesting group of orchids because they're deciduous and they're very drought tolerant when they are dormant, but they grow like crazy and they drink up water like crazy when they are actively growing. Some other common ones I've grown, let me think. Bulbophyllum is probably the biggest genus of orchids. Oh, how can I forget the dendrobiums? Sorry, this video is becoming way too long with me rambling. But dendrobiums is this another group of orchid that's super diverse. I believe they're the second most diverse genus after Bulbophyllum. There are also many different types, and they're quite resilient. Their care is more or less similar to in between Cattleya and Oncidium, I would say, but again, there's lots of species, so it's highly species dependent. Let me think if I have grown any other. Oh, also there is Patilum, or commonly known as the slipper orchids. Those are also quite famous, but they're more terrestrial instead of epiphytes. Epiphytes meaning they, like this one, mounted on top of a cork that's not growing in soil, so they're epiphytes. And terrestrial meaning they're growing in soil. So those are the ones I can think of off the top of my head. If you are interested in any orchids, please check out the different American Orchid Society or different orchid societies where you are. They have shows, events, or just take a stroll in grocery stores and look at all the orchids, and start with one, and gradually you will taste the success and the beauty of orchids, and then you will be bitten by the orchid bug, and before you know it, you will have a lot more in your collection. Just don't think they're super hard to take care of. They're actually super easy to take care of, especially if you just forget about them. They're not finicky at all, contrary to a lot of popular beliefs. Well, there are more finicky species, especially the ones native to cloud forests that requires a cool temperature and high humidity, which is kind of the opposite from our living environments. But a lot of species you can choose from that suits your living condition and can give you pretty much a year-long enjoyment of flowers, fragrances, colors, even foliage. So yeah, let me close the video of today. Well, before that, just wanted to show you my tomato, because tomato was the first video I've ever made. It's finally starting to turn red. I was waiting for this. I was so impatient, yet patient. I'm so glad they're finally turning red. I cannot start to wait to taste them. So very exciting stuff. All right, with that, I'll end the video, and thank you so much again for watching, and see you next time.